first started to write this story, there were not a lot of LGBTQ books on bookshelves. And it was way back 10 years ago in 2014, 2013. At that time, I was so hungry for like a story where I could see queer characters and they could be having this kind of like high octane adventures. But you know, I never believed it could be like a book because books like that just didn't exist back then. So as you may or may not know, like this book started as an online serial and it became like, it kind of got viral popularity, and after that it was finally published. So because it began online and I wasn't thinking about it as like a book, I think there's a lot of ways in which it's very pure. It's kind of just like straight out of my most like pure like wish for like over the top storytelling.
Yeah.
I think as a result it's weirdly authentic. And so I think that really connects with readers in a certain way. Yeah. You can write fearlessly when you think no one's going to read it. At that time, you know, the only, well, first of all, I started as everyone starts, as a reader. And so, but I grew up in like the 80s and 90s, and there were almost no, like I can count the number of queer books that there are on one hand. I remember all the titles because I read them over and over and over again. And I think, you know, especially back then where, you know, it wasn't common to be out of the closet or whatever. And then, so the only place you could find yourself was in one of these few books. So there was a way that it was like, this book is like the only friend, the only thing that knows the real me, you know. Those books were really important to me. After that, I found a community of queer writers, but they're all underground. It was all online. Yeah. And they're all writing under pseudonyms, kind of secretly on the internet. But because I found that community, it inspired me to think that I could write stories of my own as well. So I'm really grateful that that community existed. But, you know, as I was saying, even when I first began to write Captive Prince, I didn't imagine that could be like a book. Yeah. So my journey has been kind of an unusual one to publication. Yeah.
But a really great one, you know?
Yeah. I think definitely. So I was born in Melbourne in Australia, but I've lived overseas in quite a few different countries, including Italy. I lived in Japan for about 5 or 6 years. I lived briefly in China. And so I think when you live overseas for a long time, when you go somewhere where you have to learn a new language and fit into a new culture, you have this sense that like, you're an outsider trying to fit in.
Yes.
But you know, maybe a sense that you'll never really be able to fit in. Then you return home thinking you're going home to a place where you will fit in, only to find you can't really go home again either because you've been changed so much by your experience overseas. So you don't really fit anywhere anymore. You become this like strange in-between person. And so I think there's a lot of themes of like belonging and of like cultural navigation that come out in my books. But also especially in Captive Prince, the idea that like there's no such thing as like one good culture, one good country and one bad one, which is something that you do sometimes see in fantasy, but more just like we all have our flaws and we're all just trying to understand each other at the end of the day. My favorite romance trope is definitely enemies to lovers, because for me, like the most delicious part of the romance is the desire part, the blossoming romance part. And if you start as an enemy, you have so much further to travel before you reach your final destination.
Yes.
And so I really enjoy that journey. I also just like that feeling of the impossible, of like, no way, there's no way that these two characters could ever possibly, like, or could they? And so, yeah, maybe I think I have written the dynamic of friends to lovers once, and it was in the comic Offense, or I guess I'm writing it at the moment, where there is like a close friends. But I feel with them, like I love their dynamic, but I do feel like I'm really having to
Yeah.
because there's only the distance between friend and romantic partner is like,
Yeah, it could be really short,
it
right?
can be really short. Yeah, all you have to do is realize that you're in love.
Yeah, you're right. Just open your eyes,
And then it's
right?
like, oh yeah, right, okay, well, let's date.
Yeah, I guess I like you, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think comics, yeah, they're really different. Obviously, and they're different in ways that I didn't necessarily understand until I was writing it. Comics, I think they're really good at fantasy and the fantastical, because seeing is believing.
Yes, exactly.
If you're looking at it on the page, then like, oh yeah, it's definitely happening.
Yeah.
Whereas it's so much harder to make something fantastical feel like it's real when it's in a novel. Like you really you're just working your butt off to to make the reader believe that something's happening. I think that's why, there's so many tropes that are common in comics, that like superheroes. They're like, it's so ridiculous in a way. If we weren't seeing it, we wouldn't believe it.
Yeah, you will be like, what?
Yeah. Whereas there's very few novels that are successful, like superhero novels, So, so that's one difference. And I think another one is like, how do I put this? I don't know if this is too like writerly, but comics, in a way, they taught me a lot about novel writing. Mm-hmm. Like in a film, you're watching continuous action, yes. And in a comic, you have like 3 or 4 images that like stand for continuous action. So the reader's making up what happened in between each image. In a novel, I feel like there's the illusion that it's like a film and the action's just continuous, but in fact, it's not. Like a comic really taught me, like, you just choose like 3 or 4 visuals and you describe them in your book, and the reader can kind of connect the dots. You're not continuously writing your way through. So that there's like I guess there can be a difference in focus or lens, and then like the obvious one that comics just show the outside and the novel is internal. Yes. As well. And then comics are like half the work because the artist does half.
Yeah, you're right.
There's like that joke that like the writer writes like, I don't know, an enemy army appears and the artist's like, oh, damn.
Yeah.
I have to draw it. You just wrote 1 sentence, but I have to draw for 3 days.
Yes, you're right. Or whenever we see a movie from a book and we're like, oh, I imagine it different.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, it really means a lot to me because as I said earlier, like I've had the experience myself of what it means when you find a book that you can connect to or relate to, especially when you're feeling isolated in other ways because of your own identity. I've had some amazing, the readers that I've had interactions with have all been so amazing, and some of the connections that they've made with the books have been so personal as well. Yes. There's some quite dark and intense, there's some quite intense themes and some quite full-on content, especially in captive prints. And it's meant a lot to me to hear from readers who, they've found solace in that book from like difficult experiences of their own. So yeah, I really appreciate it, and I feel like I identify with them in a way because I've been there myself. Yeah.
And I also feel like they feel like you're with them, like they read it, they feel like protected, and they like get into a story that they can feel love, and from different ways that they actually can connect also with you. Not only with the characters and captive prints, but also with you as a...
I feel that in a way, like we're all going on a journey together.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I don't even know what to say about that. That just seems like a huge honor. Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love Guadalajara so much. Like the people here are so welcoming, and I've had a great time at the FIL. Like we don't have anything like this in Melbourne. So my mind was blown when I walked into the FIL for the first time. I think the thing that I've enjoyed the most is just the chance to have, I mean, this sounds a little bit naff, but the thing I've enjoyed the most is the chance to have conversations, you know, about books with people that love books here. It's just been really cool. And my only complaint is that my time here is too short. So I'm already wanting to come back.
A lot of dishes.
Oh my gosh, I've had the best food.
Really?
Yeah. So last night I ate a flan that changed my life. Apparently it's like a traditional kind that is from this area. Yeah, I think so. Like, oh my God, it's so good. And then I don't know if you know or like your listeners know, but like Australia is famous for having very bad Mexican food. Like when Mexican people come to Australia and eat the Mexican food, they're like, oh my God, what is this? So it was my first time to eat like authentic Mexican food. And it was amazing.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that.
Hi everyone, I just want to say thank you all so much for reading and supporting the series. I'm so happy to be here in Mexico, and I hope that I'll get a chance to meet some of you at the FIL or in the future.